Hello listeners and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bring you energy matters in an informal setting. Away from the constantly unfolding drama that is the coronavirus outbreak, of which you can hear daily updates on the Montel Daily Extra Pod, the subject matter today is France, and in particular its nuclear fleet. If you have wondered about 10-year inspections and much more about France's ageing reactors, you've come to the right place. Joining me, Richard Sverrisson, is my colleague Chris Eales, Montel's editor France. So Chris, welcome.
Bonjour, Richard.
Bonjour, indeed. Now, there have been some quite severe issues with French nuclear reactors in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, and we'll talk about it again and again and again and again, no doubt, because it seems to be history repeating itself. I mean, yeah, there have been serious issues, maintenance, overrunning, all kinds of problems, and new ones too, which we will discover. And there isn't really any sign of it getting any better.
I mean, the reactors themselves aren't getting any younger.
No, this is the problem, that these reactors are all, many of them are reaching close to 40 years, and they will have their fourth 10-year visits, which
we'll
means...
we'll come to that later. So the reactors are getting older. Maybe some of the security measures are getting stricter as well, or more stringent.
Yes, there are examples of at certain plants where the French Safety Authority, ASN, has upped their surveillance. That's the word they use. It's not some kind of spy film, but they say reinforced surveillance in one or two plants. We've seen this, and this means that they're carrying out more inspections, and so the controls are the scrutiny. As close as scrutiny, and that means they're finding more problems.
The more they look, maybe the more they find. I mean, that's you could argue.
Yeah.
But of course, that's the way we want it, because we want these to be absolutely safe. So we want them to be sort of heavily scrutinized. I mean, I think that's what is in everyone's best interest. We've seen sort of production at these units. It's been quite variable, hasn't it, over the years, maybe gradually sort of decreasing. I think at the peak, maybe 4 years ago, they were producing around 400 terawatt hours a year. Would that be correct?
Yes, yeah. It's a very rough figure that. I don't know exactly, but yes. I do know that this time last year, Jean-Bernard Lévy, the CEO of Eales, was talking about how the firm had planned to hit 420 terawatt hours a year, and that it was no longer going to, that those targets it would never meet those targets, at least not in the foreseeable future. So EDF signaled last year a slide in nuclear production, and that's what we've seen. Last year, 2019, nuclear output hit a 3-year low. It was 3779. Failed to reach their target and went to that three-year low.
Even though they revised their target throughout the year, didn't they?
This is their old trick of revising nuclear output, saying there's no problem, well, more or less, saying we're very sure we will meet these targets. You can guarantee we will meet these targets. And of course they don't, and they change the target. And then we've seen this, and we saw at the end of last year, they changed the target at the end of the year and fell short. So again,
what was the original at the outset? It was 395. Was it 395 terawatt hours?
Yeah, 395 it was, and in the end it hit 379.5, a 3-year low.
Okay,
it's getting poorer. Let's put it that way.
Okay. I mean, it's still a lot of electricity, of course. But what is EDF's forecast for this year?
Yeah, so this year in February they cut the 2020 output target to a range. Now they're talking about a range. They're not giving us, interestingly, a new technique. They're not giving us a specific figure. They're giving us a range. So we've got a floor of 375 terawatt hours and a ceiling of 390 terawatt hours. So this gives them a bit more leeway and suggests that they are quite uncertain. Indicates uncertainty, more uncertainty. If output were to fall to the floor level, the 375 terawatt hours, that would be the lowest since 1999. That's a 21-year low if it was to fall that far.
That's quite astonishing. So, I mean, I suppose they're giving themselves that floor, they're giving themselves leeway, that range which they haven't done before, and just to do that, as you mentioned, Chris, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a different approach. They are accepting or telling us something else, that they really can't predict as much as they just can't predict. It's possible, that they can't be as accurate as they were before. They're coming up against so many different problems. I mean, just this quote, in addition, when they announced the floor and ceiling targets, they said, in addition to the unavailability on scheduled outages, there are other recurrent causes of non-production: tests, unplanned outages, modulation of operation, environmental constraints, network constraints, which represent a volume of about 20 to 30 terawatt hours. That's why they gave the range there. It's fluid, as they say.
Take it with a pinch of salt, maybe. Yes. It self-acknowledges there's some problems at some plants. We've seen that in 2016, in 2017, 18, and last year as well. I mean, what can we expect this year? And what are the reactors that we really need to keep a close eye on, Chris?
Okay, I mean, it's always difficult. You've asked me this before, and it is difficult to
I'll ask you again.
Yeah. How many times can you ask me? 30 times?
Yeah, something like that.
I will answer on the 31st time.
Like I can mention, actually, I'm very disappointed that you're not wearing double denim today. But anyway, let's back on track, shall we? The reactors to look for in 2020.
Yeah. That just gives me time to think of an answer. Yeah. Now, the reactors to look for. Okay, having said that, I'm not going to tell you. I will try to tell you. Flamanville is definitely a nuclear power plant where we've seen problems. It has 2 reactors, 2.7 gigawatts, 1 reactor offline for over a year, another 8 or 9 months. We had seen a situation there where Flamanville was put under what they call enhanced surveillance by the safety authority last September.
The BDI.
Yes, the BDI, that those people in white coats.
Yes.
This is an example of what I was talking about before, actually, where enhanced surveillance, because of so many problems with maintenance errors, subcontract issues with subcontractors not doing their jobs up to standard according to EDF, meant that ASN stepped in, put the plant under enhanced surveillance. And so they found more issues. And the latest issue at Flamanville, actually, EDF announced micro cracks. Whenever anyone hears cracks and reactors in the same sentence. Not a good combination. No. Those two shouldn't be put together. We've heard it at Flamanville. And the cracks concern turbine engine at Flamanville. According to EDF, it's only a part of the turbine, but it's very unclear when these reactors will restart. EDF says, for example, I'm going on about Flamanville, but it is an interesting case. They say, according to Remit, 31st of May, they'll both be back online. But ASN, once again, has a much more cautious line and has told Montel that it's far too early to say when these reactors might come online because of the microcrack issues. Not only that, but back to this enhanced surveillance. They're finding more problems, and there's a lot of work to be done there. So Flamanville is definitely one to look out for. Another issue which affects a couple of plants is earthquake resistance. There was an earthquake late last year, very close to Tristan, the south of France.
Okay, so close to one of the oldest reactors.
Tristan being one of the oldest reactors in France, which already has had issues with a dam around the plant being big enough to cope with any flooding in the event of an earthquake of a certain size. So this earthquake has made ASN a little bit nervous about nuclear power plants in the area. And they've said, well, look, maybe at Tristan and Cruaz, we're going to have a look at their defences and we're going to see, is it time, they're asking the question, is it time to have another look at, in general, earthquake-resistant standards? Possibly, I don't know this, but it's possible. It's something to keep an eye on. ASN could ask EDF to reinforce quake defences at Tristan and Cruaz. And so that would lead to other delays,
And should it do so, could it build these defences while the plant's online, or would it have to do it when the plant's offline?
It's pretty early. It's too early to know that because they're still deciding whether or not they need to review. They are reviewing quake defences, but they haven't decided yet whether they need to do the work. So it's a little bit early to say, without knowing what kind of work it will be. But There is that danger, yeah. I think that's a very real danger. That's another one to look at. Also, there have been problems at Palluel, another reactor. The EDF haven't been too forthcoming about explaining the reasons for that outage. We need to dig a little bit deeper and find out what's going on there. But that's another issue. Also in the north of France.
On the coast.
Palluel is on the coast. So that's another one to look out for.
Because they've said they've mentioned high tides as a reason for the outage.
Yes, I mean, that's a specific outage. But I was talking about a longer running outage in Palluel. But no, the more recent case, which is interesting because I think this is a first of a kind. I might be wrong, but I think we haven't seen this before, that EDF actually says, we have to turn off reactors or cut capacity at reactors because of high tides, too much water. We don't know exactly what happened, and it's something we are looking into. What is the link between a high tide?
Because it raises the question as well. How high is high? I mean, what's the limit?
How high can you go?
Exactly, Chris. Exactly. Thank you. My words exactly. But
how high is high? Yeah, it's a good question.
So where's the level? I mean, is it 1 meter? Is it 6? I mean, obviously it probably isn't 6 meters. But now, those are the reactors to watch for. So Flamanville and Palluel both on the Channel coast. Northern France, Tristan is more in the south. And for those listeners who may not be aware what ASN is, it's the Nuclear Safety Authority in France. Yeah. Okay, so these are some issues at reactors that are kind of ongoing. But in addition to these, there are what you mentioned actually. Some of the reactors are going through their fourth 10-year investigations. What's happening here, and where's that happening?
Yes, well, we have a situation where a lot of French reactors are aging and they're reaching their 40 years old. And there is, it turns out, a large volume of so-called 10-year inspections. 6 are planned this year, the same as last year, which is pretty worrying, I would say, for EDF, because last year, as I said earlier, the targets were all missed, and mostly because of extensions to outages at 10-year visits. 10-year visits, we said that these are the visits that they aim to give EDF the green light to continue operating reactors for another 10 years. So they become increasingly important as reactors age. We are in a situation now where we have a high volume of these outages planned.
6 this year, you said?
6 this year. And you can see the details of each reactor on RTE's website, RTE TSO's website. But it does mean that, and hence maybe why we have this range as well, because I would expect the same problems as last year. I mean, you could argue that maybe EDF has learned from the mistakes or the time it's taken. Perhaps they've learned from last year's outages.
How long do these inspections normally take?
Well, they usually
is there a set kind of time?
It was 3 to 4 months, but now they seem to be offline for even longer. We're going past 6 months, and it's been going. We have really lengthy outages. And Flamanville is a case as well. Flamanville's been off for over a year. One of the reactors there, and these are linked to 10-year outages. So if you delay outages, the 10-year outages in 1 year, it is a knock-on effect for the following year as well. For your planning, it has a big impact on the planning because there's only a certain number of experts to go around, to do this work. So it creates chaos in the planning schedules.
Absolutely, and I think, perhaps given that context of these 10-year investigations and the expected delays, then we could be looking at more of a 375 target rather than a 390 terawatt-hour target, couldn't we? I think potentially.
Yes.
But who knows? But another thing, Chris, which I wanted to touch upon with you was, a lot of the issues that we saw in 2016 and 17 with the reactors in France were due to items or reactor pieces or, parts of the plant that were manufactured at the Le Creusot forge in France. Now, has that investigation into these parts, is that now complete, and have they all got a clean bill of health?
Yes, the investigation into equipment that made for nuclear power plants in France has been completed, EDF says. They've gone through all the files. that part of the investigations is over. They have found anomalies, compliance problems. There's a whole list of them on EDF's website, in fact, ranging from very minor issues to it's quite difficult to know whether these are serious issues or what impact they have on the running of on scheduled outages or possible maintenance in the future. But they found an awful lot of problems. That's for sure. At all these reactors, they've given them the all clear. I mean, the reality is that they've said these reactors are clear to be restarted and to, if they were stopped, and to carry on running safely. But they did nonetheless find a lot of issues. So that's more maintenance. That's more work.
Absolutely. But the fact that it's over, that's good news in some sense. Then
yes, I mean the whole thing. Good news
means that there's not this sort of shadow hanging over those reactors that they have been.
But I think people will be watching very carefully to see if there's any repeat of this kind of behaviour with the alleged fraud that happened at Le Creusot, documents which were unfit for service being checked off as if they were. And I think that's probably made the safety authority and maybe the regulator much more wary. So these things, I don't have any information to say that something else will crop up, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Absolutely. Given past experience, I think it seems kind of likely. Okay, moving on to another subject, Chris. I think coming up here is a review of the whole AREN proposal, the whole AREN law. Could you explain what this is all about?
Yeah. AREN is the rate at which EDF currently sells 25% of its nuclear output to rivals, 42 euros per megawatt hour. That's a figure set by the government CRE, the French regulator. So that's the price at which EDF sells some of its nuclear output to rivals. However, EDF has long been complaining that is too low and that they are basically giving away their nuclear power on the cheap to rivals at prices way below market levels. So they've been campaigning for a long time for more. For a higher rate. On the other hand, suppliers themselves who buy this stuff, they want to buy more, obviously, because it's a good deal. Yeah. So they want to extend the volumes available. They were asking for 150 terawatt hours. Some of the rival suppliers. Now, the government has come up with a proposal which would introduce something called a price corridor. Under this system, virtually all of EDF's annual nuclear output will be sold on the wholesale market. But the price corridor means that EDF will have to compensate suppliers if prices go above a certain level. However, if they go below a certain floor, then the suppliers will have to reimburse money to EDF. In fact, that looks like, arguably, a good deal for EDF because what they were concerned about was that when wholesale prices were high, they weren't getting a good deal. So now they can be compensated for that. So, arguably that's going to boost EDF's coffers. And that is what the government has said the aim of the proposal is, one of the aims, in order to allow them to carry out the maintenance and in order to keep these reactors in service, to extend the lifetime of the reactors. So it's a very important reform.
When does the government expect to sign this off?
I think by May we should have some idea of what this reform. At the moment, the reform isn't out for consultation, public consultation. That could just be meaningless, but usually is. But at the end of May, the government will perhaps tell us clearly what they plan to do. But at the moment, we've got this price floor, price ceiling with a €6 gap between the two, and analysts arguing that something like a 42 floor and a 48 ceiling is likely.
Okay, that's. I think. And then, of course, the European Commission needs to sign it off or approve it, which is also not a given, because I think, what they are increasingly looking at is kind of regional solutions to domestic problems. And I don't see so much regional here. I see more national. So that could be potentially an issue.
Yeah, I mean, analysts have also pointed out that the EC hasn't given its green light to this at all yet. The talks are ongoing at the moment between the EC and French government on this issue. You have to say that the context of those discussions is a change, a restructure to EDF. So there's a lot of bargaining going on about how what can EDF get if they come into line with EC demands on competition? How would this reform work? If EDF is actually buying on the wholesale market its own supplies, you need to have a split between sales and distribution and production.
I mean, it sounds like, Chris, there's plenty of stuff and plenty of topics here that we'll return to in the course of the year.
EDF restructure is going to be a big one to watch out. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Chris, thanks very much for joining the Montel pod. I'm sure we'll have all the fans clamoring for double denim for the next episode where you're on the pod. But
I'll do my best to get some double denim. I'll get down to the laundrette.
Just look in your wardrobe. Thanks, Chris. And that's all for now, listeners. Please follow all our news on Montel News, and you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you. Goodbye.